This is the E-Commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. I am your host, Jason Greenwood, and before I introduce our next incredible guest to present to you today, I would love to recommend that you go to your favorite podcast platform of choice and or YouTube. Follow and share our episodes as a small niche podcast. We always appreciate your help with sharing the love around, and of course, it helps us with the algorithms as well. And whether we like it or not, all of us are a little bit of a slave to the algos. We've got over 450 episodes in our back catalog for you to chew on. And so we would love for your help with that. We don't do any marketing. You are our marketing channel. So we appreciate your help with that. But without further ado, I would love to welcome Francisco Campos from Onport. Well,
Hi, Jason. Great to meet you and great to be here on the podcast.
great to meet you on the pod. We met last week in person at B2B Online Florida, and we spoke very briefly about what you're doing over at Onport. So it was great to catch up in person, and that's what I love about the end of COVID. I think one of my favorite parts about COVID coming to an end is being able to meet people in person again, being able to have meaningful conversations. You just can't replace that human physical energy, can you?
No, absolutely not. I think it's great to get an industry, particularly an industry that's online, in person, and getting a chance to speak personally and have more engaging conversations than the one that you're ever able to achieve online.
Yeah, no question about it. Look, those of us that work in the e-com space and the digital space, yes, we can do 99% of what we do online. That's not a problem. We pretty much have always been able to do most of what we do online. But man, I tell you, you definitely feel like your tribe is there in person. And what is it they say? Your vibe attracts your tribe. And so it's interesting, especially when we think about B2B e-commerce specifically, because e-commerce is already a really extreme sub-niche of that broader IT field. And then when you get into B2B e-commerce, it's an even more extreme sub-niche of the e-commerce niche. It is nice to be there with your people, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a chance to share ideas and niches is something that excites us all. I think the more niche you go, the more nuance, the more people have to say about the topic, and the more exciting it gets.
Absolutely. And before we get into Onport and what you do and how you do it, why don't you tell us how you got even into this space? Now, it's interesting because you're working in a place where you've been head of ops, you've been head of supply chain and partnerships, you worked with Farfetch Group, which everybody knows Farfetch now. I don't think there's anybody in the e-commerce space that doesn't know what Farfetch is. You've worked head of supply chain and partnerships at Overcube, founder at the C Collective. You've got this entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial mindset, but you've also got this deep operational expertise in the e-commerce and omni-channel world. And I'm guessing that's what's led you to your work at Onport.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an engineer by education. So I've always been very process, numbers, and analytical oriented. And I'm actually an industrial engineer, but the first chance I got for an actual job, I didn't want to go into the industry. I didn't want to go into manufacturing, which was what was expected out of my degree. And I had the opportunity to start my career at Farfetch. So obviously, many years ago, was just a small startup based out of Porto and London. And it was really just getting started. They had a small office in Porto. And it was really an interesting opportunity to join a fast growing technology startup at a time where not every company was a fast growing technology company. So this was almost 10 years ago. And it was really interesting to join a company in that fast growth trajectory. This was a few years before the company PO'd. So everything was really on fast growth acceleration and being able to see the ins and outs of not just a technology company, but an e-commerce company, a retail company, and the specifics of a company operating in the luxury space was really interesting. Even within Farfetch, I was part of the B2B business unit that was providing e-commerce services to a wide range of luxury brands. So they were trying to be the Shopify of the luxury space. So being in the role of a service provider so early on in such a fast growing industry really helped me to really form a lot of knowledge about that industry and what is expected out of technology within B2B and the overall e-commerce landscape.
Wow, incredible. And Am I reading that Onport was actually acquired by Farfetch as well?
Yeah. So, yeah, a really interesting story, interesting journey. So, at after a few years with Farfetch, I decided to move on to another role. I went to a company that's a shoe marketplace. So, I went from a luxury marketplace to a startup shoe marketplace out of the north of Portugal. They operate a few of the largest shoe brands in Portugal, and they created a marketplace to consolidate shoe brands from the group, but not only from the group. So a true marketplace that was bringing shoe brands together. As you mentioned, I was overseeing the supply chain and the partnerships side. So that meant finding new shoe brands that would be a good fit for the marketplace, bringing them on board commercially and operationally, and making sure that they have all the right tools to succeed in the marketplace. In that journey, that's where we found this little platform called Jetty back then, which is now Onport, but it was called Jetty back then. And we really needed a technology solution for the marketplace side. So for vendor onboarding, for giving shipping labels to the sellers. And we were running everything on a custom build. So everything had been built in-house with the support of an agency. We thought that we could tweak like e-commerce to make room for the marketplace business, but we couldn't, right? There was really a lot of technology that was needed to build in-house and to mature. We went to the markets at that time and we settled for a combination of Shopify on the front end, Jetty on the back end. So that was the new tech stack that we were going to re-platform into. And that's where I got a chance to learn a lot about Jetty, a lot about the technology that was being created. I was on calls with my now boss every week. So just throwing feature after feature requests, things that we needed to see on the platform to get things running smoothly. And I was really amazed at the speed that things were getting developed, how mature the platform was becoming. And I understood the potential for a back office marketplace technology because I really think that a lot of e-commerce is moving towards marketplaces that add a lot of value to consumers. So I really understood the need the platform was solving. And then I engaged with the founder. I learned it was a team of one. I was really surprised to hear it was a team of one. And he invited me to join the team. And we've been growing since. That eventually led us to fundraising. So we were considering different fundraising opportunities. We had been bootstrapped the company for almost 2 years. And within those fundraising opportunities, we engaged with Farfetch. And there was an appetite not just to help us fund the business, but to actually acquire it. So we were acquired by Farfetch a little over 3 years ago.
Wow, exciting. And obviously, with a much bigger umbrella and pool of resources to pull from Farfetch Group, that's an exciting acquisition, an exciting, I guess, an exciting transition to make into the subsidiary of a much larger group of companies. And so amazing. They certainly have the background in marketplaces to be able to understand the needs of marketplace operators. And so being able to provide technology on a broader scale to the ecosystem in an AWS-like model where, hey, look, we're eating our own dog food, but then we're also spinning this off and turning what would be a cost center into a kind of a profit center in the business. It's a well-trodden path for sure, and you take control of your own destiny by having that underneath the umbrella. When you started, I guess let's backtrack a little bit here. As I read it on the tin, and in all transparency, I've never worked with Onport before, but I've worked with a lot of other marketplace technologies before, both as part of e-commerce platforms. Famously, Oro and Vtex and a few others have marketplace modules as part of their core e-commerce platform. And then there are some standalone platforms out there like Miracle and Marketplacer and Nautical and a few other platforms out there that can help you set up your dedicated e-commerce marketplace if you so desire. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of bespoke inbuilt stuff. And then there's plugins that you can plug in as an app to the likes of a Shopify to add multi-vendor capability to the platform. So there's a few different ways people go about this. And then when we think of the middleware, we've got all of the omni-channel integration middleware platforms like your Channel Advisors, like your Feedonomics, there's 100 of them out there. And so when you think about where Onport fits into this picture, as I read what you guys do and what you deliver, it's not 100% clear to me if you see yourselves as a replacement for a Miracle or a Nautical, whether you see yourself as a replacement almost like taking the place of an omni-channel middleware platform, or maybe a little bit of a hybrid of the two, and then doing stuff that maybe no one else does as well. So maybe help me understand where you fit into the ecosystem picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a great view of the landscape, so I think you defined it really well. We absolutely sit on what you mentioned initially. So we are a miracle marketplace or nautical competitor. That's our core focus. Marketplace, back office operations as a service. We focus on clients being able to engage with their sellers, bringing that product catalog on board, being able to manipulate that product catalog in whatever way they see fit before publishing that product catalog up to a front end. So we focus exclusively on the back ends. That's something that will differ us a little bit from Nautical, for example, that will offer some sort of front end solution. We're fully dedicated to the back end and to the back end operations. We feel there are great platforms that have done terrific work in developing a mature e-commerce and consumer experience like Shopify, like BigCommerce, like Commerce Tools. And we integrate with those platforms, those best of breed platforms, to make sure that those platforms are the ones delivering that amazing customer experience. And we are the ones delivering first amazing vendor experience. So for the sellers that are supplying for that marketplace, but also all of the operations that are required for their marketplace to run successfully. So this has been an industry that has historically been dominated by Miracle. They were the first to enter the space more than 10 years ago, and they still remain the largest player in the space today. But as more companies come into the space, and it's great to see that competition, we see companies with different nuances, right? There are the ones that combine front end plus back end, and I think that's a great way to get started because there are some nuances to marketplaces that are hard to reflect on some front end experiences. And then there are companies that are focusing, I would say, a bit further up market, where there's that decoupling between the back end and the front end, and they allow for each to perform to its best capabilities. And that's the path that we have been. And also our path has been to go consistently up markets. We were working with smaller clients 5 years ago. Today we're working with 10 times the size of those clients, and we keep working with larger and larger clients. Also because we focus a lot on the technology itself, right? So we see other competitors that layer in a lot of the consultancy side, the strategy side, how to run a marketplace, how to get your margins, how to make the financial model to make sense. And obviously, there is a lot of value behind that, but we have been focusing exclusively on the technology so that companies that know how they want to run their marketplace model don't hit their heads on any limitations while doing so. So we want our technology to be as flexible, composable, and mature as possible to make sure that clients running their marketplace model can achieve any use case.
I guess if we boil it down, we can think of you as a headless marketplace platform. That's what we can think of it as, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I like
Yeah.
to say
And
headless and composable as well, right? Like we don't want to operate as an island. If you have a great PIM system that you want to integrate, because it's going to help you rework all of the product catalog information in a very streamlined way with teams behind it, with AI behind it even, then you can. If you want to use our technology alone, then you can. If you want to build custom technology that plugs into our platform that is getting data out, getting data in, getting that data published to the marketplace, then you can as well. So for sure, headless, composable is our focus.
love it. And what is your, just finger in the air, you probably don't know exact numbers, but if you were to think about what the composition of your customer base is, and you were to say, okay, B2C, D2C marketplace versus B2B focused marketplaces, what would that split roughly look like? Are you dealing with a lot of B2B vendors, or are you dealing with primarily, are these B2C marketplaces that you're primarily dealing with?
Yeah, so historically for us, we've always been more focused on B2C. So that's how we started. Again, we started down markets, we've been going up market. We were essentially an app in the Shopify App Store ecosystem. We're now much more than that. But that meant that historically we're building technology and our marketing efforts going towards B2C. And now we're seeing a really great opportunity with marketplace models taking over B2B. So it is an opportunity that we're seeing come to fruition. And we're understanding that actually our technology has always been prepared for those B2B use cases. particularly because of our headless approach, right? B2B comes with additional complexity, but our clients are building that additional complexity on top of our existing infrastructure. And that is delivering for the ultimate use cases that they want to see for their business. I think the way that we've built our technology has really allowed us to make a smooth transition from being B2C. It is recent for us. And right now it only represents 10 to 15% of our customer base. But we really see the value of B2B marketplaces. And we think it's going to take an increasing share, not just of our customer base, but of e-commerce revenue as a whole.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think the interesting thing about the B2B world that I've increasingly come to recognize over the last 4 years of consulting to this space very heavily is that there's very few manufacturers out there in the US, for example, that are solely manufacturers. Oftentimes, they are manufacturers and wholesale distributors. So maybe they manufacture 20, 30% of their catalog, but the other 60, 70% they're a distributor of because they don't want to supply SKUs, they want to supply solutions, right? And at the end of the day, even if they don't make the entire solution, they want to be able to sell the entire solution. And so it makes sense especially if they have a lot of traffic coming to their site that they want to monetize, and without having to become a formal distributor of these products and without having to onboard these products into their PIM system, into their ERP and set pricing and all that sort of stuff, and then decide, okay, do we hold these in our inventory or do we effectively drop ship these and send the orders off to the manufacturers to then fulfill, and then how do we communicate that to the customers? A lot of them are saying, look, okay, for the top 20% of our SKUs, we're gonna hold those in stock. We're gonna set the prices on those. We're gonna own that inventory. We're gonna be the seller of record. But for the rest of our catalog, we might as well just set up a marketplace. We can onboard suppliers faster. They become responsible for the content, the imagery, etc. They become responsible for setting the price. We establish just a simple trade agreement with them where we get a commission. We clip the ticket on every transaction that comes through, but they have to fulfill the order. They can automate the integration with us. And so I'm finding that these kind of hybrid sales models are becoming much more common in the B2B world than they were even 5 years ago. And it's because of that solutioning mindset in the B2B world where they're wanting to be a solution vendor, not a SKU vendor.
Absolutely. We're seeing the same shifts. And I think it makes total sense, right? Like you're having to put a lot of efforts into the SKUs that you're selling, right? And sometimes they don't have the sufficient throughput for you to be putting all of that effort, right? And you end up doing it just because you want to have a big enough catalog that's enticing to work with. But you almost make that judgment call of, I'm going to make money on these SKUs and I'm going to lose money on those other SKUs. And at the end of the day, hopefully I'm making money. But marketplaces and dropship are giving businesses another tool that's helping them reshape the way that they're conducting business, right? They can have, as you said, like the top 20%, 30, 40% that they know they have margins, that they know they are worth the investment, are worth to stock in a warehouse, are worth to make product descriptions, are worth to do proprietary fulfillments into their customers. And then there's the 60% that's not worth it, right? But they understand that they need to have a big enough catalog to be attractive, but they can still achieve that through the dropshipping model. They can offer a very similar experience if they do it in a very curated way, where they are maybe even still reworking product descriptions. They're overseeing the supply chain, right? Even if they don't own it, they can oversee it. They can be responsible for customer service. They can engage with clients on behalf of the sellers. They can do a lot of value add things on behalf of the seller, but maybe stocking it in a warehouse is not value add, right? Maybe having all of the assortments available is not value add, right? Drop shipping is really giving businesses a tool to make more efficient decisions based on the demands, right? At the end of the day, that's what matters is the consumer demands, and finding more efficient ways to work with their sellers, with their vendors. And it's usually welcomed by both parties. You could say, of course, a seller would rather just make the sale and have that item sit in someone else's warehouse. But actually, if you find the right commission rates that gives them more margin on that sale, they are willing to keep that item in their warehouse and to fulfill it to the end customer. So it's a really interesting business tool to experiment with third-party supply. Not everything has to be first party. And things will reach an equilibrium that makes sense for both the marketplace and the seller that's listing on that marketplace, in order to achieve more efficiencies for both parties and actually more efficiencies for the end customer as well. So I think it's a triple win scenario for the industry, but it is a business tool that is still getting adopted, right? We're seeing more and more of it, but there's still some hesitance to adopt it in a large scale.
Yeah, and look, I think to your point, I think one of the reasons or one of the things that scares a lot of merchants off from implementing a marketplace is the complexity of that, trying to do that, and either trying to bolt different pieces of technology together, a bunch of apps, a bunch of back office systems, maybe tweaking your order management system, maybe tweaking the workflows in your ERP based on the SKU, and then routing that out to someone else for fulfillment in a dropship way. Let's not underestimate or undersell the complexity of a marketplace business model. It is very complex and is very unique. And assuming you can solve for the supply side and you can solve for the demand side, that's the strategy piece that you need to work out, and you need to confirm internally or via consultancy or whatever. You need to prove out, and you need to, I guess, assess the TAM of your market. You need to be able to say, okay, we think we can commercially make this work. But once you've done that, and once you've done your business planning exercise, and maybe even once you've started to create relationships with some of these suppliers, maybe as a distributor partner, then from there, it radically shifts from let's prove out the business model to let's figure out how operationally we're going to do this without it breaking the back of our business. And there's a whole lot of things, because I've been involved with helping people set up marketplaces before, and it's a beast. It's a beast of a task. And especially if we're talking about a headless, now we're talking about what kind of experience do we want people to have on the front end. And when we think about some of the operational considerations that brands sometimes don't realize they need to think about when they think, oh, let's set up a marketplace. If you say it fast, it sounds easy, right? But when you think through and the requirements involved, it gets very intense very quickly. And so let's just think through some of the operational considerations here and how you guys help brands automate or largely automate a significant percentage of those operational nightmare pieces that they have to implement. So let's just think about catalogs, right? There's usually one of two ways your suppliers will like to get the catalog into your system. It'll either be via API, and it'll come either from their PIM system, maybe from their ERP system, maybe even from their e-commerce platform if they have one. They will want to get that whole catalog uploaded into your system via API, or they simply will take a CSV export out of their system, and then they'll want to do a CSV export into your system, right? To populate the images, the descriptions, the attributes, all that sort of stuff, plus the pricing, if they set the pricing or if you set the pricing, depending on how that works. Then once we've dealt with the whole catalog nightmare, because in addition to not just getting the catalog into your system, but being able to effectively map all of that data that they have in their own unique way, with their own unique categorization, with their own unique attribute names and everything else, being able to map those effectively to your website structure and your marketplace structure and your equivalent attributes, that is a big consideration. And so being able to ease that process for the supplier becomes a mission critical piece of functionality. Then we have, of course, the routing and splitting of orders, because usually one of the benefits of a marketplace to the customer is the fact that they can have 10 different items in their cart. They can have a composite cart where they can buy a whole solution and suite of goods, and they don't have to think about where all those different products are coming from. It's just, hey, I want these 5-10 things, just like I would on Amazon. And then behind the scenes, when the order gets placed and I place one payment for that entire cart, then the order gets routed, the payments get routed to the appropriate parties. And then, of course, you have to think about the commission structure associated with that, or the rev share structure that is associated with each one of those individual sales. And you may have different trade agreements with each one of those 5 sellers with products in the cart. You may have 5 different trade agreements with them. You may have different commission structures by product category or product SKU or by product supplier. There's a lot to consider just in the payments piece and just in the order management and routing piece and the order updates piece coming from those suppliers when they want to push back in the fulfillment information back into the core commerce platform, so that we can then send out all the transactional emails to that customer for those 5 different items in the cart as they go through the fulfillment process. Then assuming everything goes well, that's great. You're probably still going to have some returns that you have to think about and deal with. Okay, cool. Now, do we route the return back to the seller, the owner of the marketplace? Do we route it directly back to the individual sellers? And in those different scenarios, it may be different by supplier. Who owns the returns process and how that cost gets shared and refunded to the customer, and how that gets taken out of the commissions that are owed and all those sorts of things. So operationally, there's just so many things to think about when it's all fine and good if you're just one supplier and you're selling and you're the seller of record for everything and you're responsible for all returns, all refunds, all store credits, all everything. It becomes a hell of a lot easier, at least from a pricing and price management perspective. But when we're talking multi-vendors here, all of those trade terms are unique in many cases between the marketplace operator and the ultimate vendor of the products. Plus, we have to think about the customer experience and making that as seamless, easy, and user-friendly as possible. So operationally, lots to consider to make it, to create an Amazon-like experience for someone, right?
Absolutely, Jason. And I think that was one of the best Onport pitches I've ever heard, because you just described all of the operations, pretty much all of them, all of the headaches that goes into running a marketplace, and why technology is so necessary to automate all of those operations, right? If you don't have technology to automate those operations, it's impossible to run a marketplace. It's a nightmare. It's not viable. It's not financially viable without the technology. So I'll recap some of the things that you mentioned. So on the product catalog side, yes, you need to be able to import those product catalogs in a seamless way. And seamless is key here. Make it easy for your sellers as well, because you're convincing them to list on your marketplace. So it needs to be seamless for them. If they would rather do it by API, then it's okay. If they don't want to commit to an API integration, maybe connecting to their e-commerce store is a great way to get all of that product catalog information. FTP, CSV, XML. So there are a number of ways that you can get that product data, but it won't come in the format that you want it, right? Like it won't come in the format that you want to plug it into your marketplace. And it comes down to who's going to have the work. Is it the seller? Is it the marketplace? Or can the technology bridge some of that work? Of course, we try to bridge as much as we can with mapping categories, mapping sizes, mapping colors, mapping all sorts of attributes. We can have the seller do some manual mapping if needed. We can have the marketplace do some manual mapping if needed. We have some AI-powered mapping as well. So we really try to maximize what technology is able to do in that mapping attributes process. And then inventory levels, tied really close to the catalog, are the inventory levels, which need to be constantly updated. And the bigger the marketplace, the higher the throughput, the more frequent updates you need in those stock levels. And again, it comes with a lot of weight on infrastructure to be able to do that. So you need a really robust infrastructure that's able to support millions of inventory updates every day. And all of those considerations will just weigh in on the technology as much.
And pricing.
And pricing. Yeah. So inventory levels and pricing for sure. Everything will weigh on the technology because it's impossible otherwise. And it won't just be that, right? Like there will need to be people managing the marketplace, managing those relationships with the sellers. But we try to remove a lot of the heavyweight activities for running a marketplace. So that's essentially what we focus on as a service provider, is to automate all of those operations for marketplaces to work in the leanest way, making them more financially sustainable, but also helping sellers easily list on those marketplaces, making them more attractive to list on compared to marketplaces that put a lot of manual workload on the sellers. So it goes also back to the orders or the routing, getting those orders in front of the sellers. When they're fulfilling those orders, how do you get tracking information back to the end consumer so they know where their items are? Do you want to give a shipping label to the seller? Do you prefer that they use their own carrier agreements, different commission agreements per seller? As you mentioned, per item, per SKU, we pride ourselves in having per SKU commission rates and variable commission rates. Each platform will have its strengths, right? Some platforms won't have gone so deep into commission rate calculations, I feel like we have. And again, like where we haven't fully developed for a particular use case, we always have our APIs around the product to enable customers to build that specific use case using the information that's living with Onports. It is because the marketplace model is so nuanced that we don't want customers to be boxed into existing features, and we want them to be able to build their own technology on top. And that's why we believe so much in being headless and composable. But you're right, marketplaces are a beast. I don't want to make anyone think that running a marketplace is an easy task. E-commerce was even more of a beast many years ago. The likes of Shopify and BigCommerce and commerce tools have come in to help simplify that beast and to make it viable for businesses to be running that business model profitably. And that's exactly what we're trying to do for marketplaces.
And do you find that the majority of merchants that start to use you to run their marketplace, let's say they're also a supplier in their own right, let's say they're a seller, and maybe they even have an e-commerce site today, maybe it's a D2C e-commerce site or whatever, or maybe they're an aggregator retailer and they're running Shopify or something like that. Do you find that they end up usually integrating with you? If they decide to implement a marketplace, they become just another supplier on their marketplace, and that they integrate with you just like any of the other suppliers would. Obviously, there's a 0% commission rate because they're just one of their own vendors. But do you find that just to streamline operations on their side, that they just become yet another supplier on the marketplace that they're operating? Or do you find that they usually keep their standalone e-commerce operation running and operating as normal, and then alongside of that, maybe bring in some additional products via your marketplace technology? Or what do you find is the typical go-to-market model once they decide to build out a marketplace as a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's an existing retailer like trading at scale, there will be a lot of processes and systems dedicated to that e-commerce transaction. So you will have your ERP, your PIMS, integrations into your warehouse management system. So all of that is in place to ensure a smooth e-commerce transaction. And then you're trying to bring sellers on board, right? Like you're trying to expand your product catalog. And again, you want to make it as seamless as possible for them. Typically, what we find is because those sellers have also streamlined everything for their e-commerce operation, integrating into their e-commerce storefronts is a great entryway, right? Because you send an order to that e-commerce storefront, that order will go into their ERPs, into their WMSs, so it will follow everything that their own e-commerce order would follow. So it integrates into all of those systems that are already powering that e-commerce experience, right? There's no need to develop like more proprietary technology to be running that marketplace model, because those sellers will have that order cascade into their existing systems. What we have found is that if you are, let's say, if you are a retailer and you have a number of stores, if you don't have yet a fully developed e-commerce experience, the marketplace technology can help a lot with that, because the marketplace technology can treat those stores as independent sellers for their marketplace, and day one you didn't have anything, and the next day you have those stores as sellers for the marketplace, and you're actually just pulling together all of the product catalog that you have in multiple stock points, and now you're able to seamlessly manage those multiple stock points and have them list on the marketplace, and you are adding additional stock depth, you're adding more product catalog,
Basically.
more supply that it was hard for you to tap as a retailer before. And the marketplace technology is there to help tap into a supply that's outside of your current ecosystem, right? I think it really depends on how mature their e-commerce ecosystem already is. If it is already easy to tap into that additional supply, if not, that's exactly what marketplace technology focuses on.
Makes sense. And I guess they would just have to have a rule if an order comes down into the ERP and it's 10 SKUs in an order and only one SKU they're selling directly, then effectively the ERP has to ignore the other 9 on the order, and they only fulfill and worry about the ones that are in their system that they can recognize and match, and then they fulfill as per normal. And then I guess the marketplace system takes care of all the other items on the order. It makes it a little more streamlined. And then I guess from a financial standpoint, it simply becomes a ledger entry as we do these transactions with the other vendors. Hey, cool, this is the revenue in, here's the profit share for us, here's our income from that transaction, and here's the money we've paid out effectively in commissions. And it becomes a journal entry in the ERP as opposed to a full-blown individualized transaction.
So I think you just cut off for these last 2 seconds.
Yeah. So I guess from an integration perspective, it becomes a lot simpler when you've got suppliers that you don't have to onboard them as formal suppliers into your ERP system. These are trading relationships, and you're not tracking each individual transaction. You're effectively aggregating all the transactions you're doing together against that one supplier and saying, "Hey, look, here's the money in, here's the money out, here's the rev share, and boom, here's the journal entry in the ERP for accounting and reconciliation purposes."
Absolutely. And even financially, like it helps find a much better balance between the marketplace and sellers, right? Again, going back to that first party model where you're ordering stock, you're paying in 90 days, it will take more time for money to flow from one party to the other. With the marketplace, they're usually doing consolidations every 15 days, every 30 days. So money is flowing faster, sellers are getting paid faster, marketplace is taking that money upfront, but immediately they are dispersing it to their sellers. So even from a financial standpoint, there are a lot of advantages to the marketplace model compared to the first party model.
Makes complete sense. And is there anything today that your customers are asking you for that you don't do, that you think, hey, look, 6 months, we don't do this today, but our customers want it. In 6 months' time, we're going to be doing it. Or do you see some other gaps in the marketplace where you go, hey, we don't do this today, but we think there's a market opportunity for this, and we think we want to add this functionality or capability to our platform? Is there anything on your roadmap that you'd like to share that you see as a really big priority?
Yeah, it really comes down to the nuances of running a marketplace. I think you touched on it a little bit in the beginning. Let's say that you are a watch marketplace, right? So a fine watch marketplace. And maybe you want to start opening to peer, right? Like you want individuals to sell their used Rolexes, but you as the marketplace, you want to take a step in validating the quality for those watches, right? So you want that intermediate step where the watch is not going directly to the end customer. It's going to your warehouse first for verification, for quality assessment before going out to the end consumer. That's one use case that we didn't have in the past, and we had to make changes to our system to be able to adapt to. And those are the kinds of things that I know that we will have to keep adapting ourselves to be able to offer, because the marketplace model will get increasingly more nuanced and different categories will have its own nuances. And we want to come to a place where we're not making those individual changes. We have the platform flexible enough where those changes in whatever shape or form happen, the platform is there to be able to support those different flows. And I think the order splitting, order routing, logistics flows, return flows as well. It's something that's going to be increasingly challenged as marketplaces grow and want to further optimize their operations. So I think it will remain like a really interesting challenge for us to tackle and for us to solve as a business. It's been great to solve those use cases so far, and our platform is much more mature and stronger because of those use cases that maybe at one point we feel like they're edge cases, but they're not. We're just going to
Yeah.
see them happen in other businesses, in other categories. And every time that we develop something for a customer, do it for the entire platform to make sure that it's accessible by every other customer. And as we get challenged, we also create a stronger and stronger platform that's able to cater for those use cases.
And how do you guys make your money? Like, you're a SaaS platform, right? You're a full versionless multi-tenant SaaS platform. It's not an on-prem technology. So do you charge by module? Do you charge by GMV through the platform? Do you charge a per transaction fee? Like, how do you guys make your money as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a combination of subscription, getting access to different features, right? Like sometimes smaller companies don't need to use the entirety of our platform. Maybe they want to tap into the vendor payouts module, right? So they don't see the value in that. Maybe logistics, they won't be offering shipping labels, so they don't need to integrate with a third-party shipping label providers. We have different features, different modules that we can price in accordingly. And then as you scale, everything goes back to the GMV take rates as we are helping those clients grow. Our technology infrastructure to support that growth is increasing as well. So we really think about tying pricing to value, right? So we want to make sure that as pricing is increasing for the customer, so is the value, right? And hopefully more than proportionately to make sure that it makes sense financially for that customer to be running their marketplace solution on ports. We see tremendous return on investment from the alternative of building in-house. There's no question there, because we've built this technology over the course of more than 5 years, and we've heard use cases and edge cases from over 500 customers over the years. So we've built a lot. I find it really hard for anyone to have a higher return on investment building in-house. But then we keep building to help the customer grow, right? And we want to be incentivized to help the customer grow, and that's why we think the take rate with economies of scale is the fairest way for us to be pricing our services.
Makes sense. And how do you guys see yourself like in the pantheon of other alternative marketplace management platforms out there? What do you think is your really unique UVP? What do you think sets yourself apart from some of the other competitors out there in the marketplace? Because you're not a competitor of one. Very few companies are. There are alternatives out there. What do you think really differentiates you guys from the other players in the market?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is our exclusive focus on the technology, right? We are really a technology service provider. We want to charge for the technology. We are not trying to combine consultancy and technology to win one. We feel like that is somewhat limiting businesses to adopt the technology in the way the technology exists, rather than how the technology can serve the customer use case. And layering in that consultancy is almost to educate the customer to use the technology as it is, right? And we don't want those competing interests, because it can pull customers in a direction that is not the best for them. So we really want to focus exclusively on the technology. And the second part of that is technology built for technology companies, right? And when I say that, is that we want to meet with technology teams on the other side. We want to meet clients that want to build that custom workflow on top of our existing technology. We want to have an outstanding developer experience, developer portal, developer documentation. We want clients to be building on top of our technology, so that, again, they don't hit their heads on any limitations. And that has been our focus, and that will remain our focus, because it's the change that we're seeing in the market, right? Like, retailers used to be just retailers, and they're in the digital space, and they have to be in the digital space, and they need to understand the technology that's powering their e-commerce and be able to explore it further, and to fine tune the technology. And the same thing will happen for marketplaces. So maybe the second wave of marketplaces was able to grow significantly with the existing technology, but as those businesses grow and mature, they will want to adopt, they will want to fine tune their use cases, and we want it to be the platform where they don't hit their heads on any limitations. And I think that's what's really differentiating ourselves from the competitors.
And do you find yourself mostly engaging with technical teams, CTOs, CIOs, IT managers within the brands themselves, or do you find that most of the implementations are being done by agencies that are partnering with the brands? Maybe they've already got an e-commerce agency partner that owns all their system integrations, owns their customer experience. Maybe they're already experienced at building out headless front ends and React, etc. Are you finding, or is it a pretty even split between in-house teams doing all this development work, doing all this integration work, versus agency partners that are working with you as acting as the essential technical bridge between your platform and the merchants who want to create these amazing experiences?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty even split. So I think the more often how I see it is, the more mature the business is from a technology standpoint, the more they are taking it step by step in-house, and they really want to be the owners and to control and to make sure that IP and knowledge sits within the business. But we have a lot of opportunities to collaborate with agencies, with solution providers, and there's a lot of value because they really have a great understanding of the ecosystem, a great understanding of the big picture that sometimes the retailers and the brands that want to launch those marketplaces still don't have. So they still don't have the understanding of the underlying technology to power those marketplaces, whereas the agencies already do, having gone through a few of those projects. It's often easier for us to work with agencies because they know their stuff and they know
Yeah.
how,
Same language.
and we speak absolutely the same language compared to a business that isn't tech oriented. But it is also an absolute pleasure to work with businesses that are tech oriented, right? That understands what we're doing it, why we're doing it, and how they will reap the benefits from working with a solution like ourselves.
Love it. And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way? I'll drop a link to your website and to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to chat to you about your platform, about how it works, and they're thinking about setting up a marketplace of their own, what's the best way to get a hold of you and have a chat?
Absolutely. So if they want to learn more about Onport, visiting our websites, looking at them with our team. If they want to talk more about marketplaces, technology for marketplaces, and everything in between, just sending me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always more than happy to talk to people that are trying to understand the space or that want to have a conversation about it.
Amazing. Listen, Francisco, this has been an incredible conversation. You've really opened my eyes to some of the challenges and the opportunities of modern marketplace technology, and also what the opportunity for merchants looks like out there, and some of the things they need to think about if they're seriously considering adopting a marketplace model in their business as a serious trading channel. So I really appreciate it. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, an hour has absolutely flown by. Now, this is where I get to turn the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like, can be personal or professional. So, Francisco Campos from Onport, what is your question for me today?
Jason, I think following the topic of marketplaces, and because you've shown so much passion and understanding for the marketplace business model, like what do you think will be the role of marketplaces in the future of e-commerce?
Look, I think even in the B2B world, which is where I primarily focus now, they are still the fastest growing sales channel of all B2B sales channels today. So whether that's selling through Amazon Business, whether that's setting up their own marketplace, whether that's selling through maybe another regional marketplace or a vertical specific marketplace, we see the biggest sellers in the B2B world are selling via marketplaces and or operating their own marketplaces. And I expect that to continue to increase, mainly because it is a massive convenience play for the buyer, right? They can go to one system, they can make a huge procurement for a project, a job, an opportunity. Pardon me. And I think the key here is that the convenience of B2B marketplaces is the same as it is for B2C, D2C marketplaces. Like, the convenience factor is what makes those so attractive. It's not necessarily even just the cheapest price, right? It is the fact that I can go to a single marketplace and I can get an entire solution for my challenge, my problem, my opportunity, my project, my program of work. And I think that will continue to increase. My concern for the B2B world is that they're already so far behind from a tech savviness perspective, and they have relied so long on the traditional sales rep model, mediated model, that they're already playing catch up from a digital perspective. They're already playing catch up just to implement e-commerce, just to implement punch out, just to implement EDI based ordering, just to get out of this fully manual human mediated sales model. There are many brands that are still struggling with that and have never done any form of e-commerce in their business. I think the stats are something like over 60% of B2B sellers in the United States today have no digital sales channels at all in their business. It's only about 40% that do. So we have a lot of work to do in the B2B world just to get them up to speed. And when I have clients and merchants coming to me saying, what can we do with AI? I'm like, let's crawl, walk, run here, right? Where you are today, with the sole focus of creating a better customer experience for your buyers. And if we think about that first, we think about what experience do we want your customers to have when they engage with you? And we need to canvas. We actually need to have conversations with your buyers to ask them, what are the priority of things that they need from you that you do not do today that would make their lives easier as the buyer? And oftentimes those conversations go down different tracks to what the brand thinks it's going to go down. And so I think that before most of these brands can even start to think about the marketplace model, or even marketplace as a sales channel, as a third-party sales channel, they really have to elevate their internal digital knowledge, capability, understanding, And first and foremost, it is a mindset change, because most B2B sellers today do not realize that over 71% of B2B buyers today in the United States are millennial or Gen Z. That is a massively changing buying demographic. Those buyers want speed, they want efficiency, they want simplicity. They are buying as part of their day job. They're not doing this to be inspired. They're not going to a website to be wowed and inspirational, aspirational experiences. They're doing it as their day job. And so they want to buy quickly, easily, and efficiently, and then get on to the next task. And so I think that many B2B sellers, they are architecting digital solutions that are all about making them more efficient and profitable instead of making their customers more efficient and profitable, which by definition means if they did focus on that, the adoption rate of those digital technologies would be sky high. And so I think it's really just about developing an empathetic mindset in the B2B world that doesn't always exist yet there, and saying, what are the challenges my customers are facing, and how can I help them meet those challenges head on and make their lives easier and better? And that is what will make their business sticky, not the challenge of buying through them. I think historically in B2B, there's been a lot of monopolies. There's been a lot of exclusive distributors, and that world is largely going away now. And especially wholesale distribution, they have to create an amazing customer experience for their customers, because they can no longer rely on exclusive distributorship partnerships anymore.
Yeah, I think everything will go back to customer centricity.
Yes.
It is for B2C, and it absolutely will be for B2B. So no, it's been slow, but there's no way around it.
And it's changing quick. So I'm super excited to be a part of it and play my own little part in this space, and be able to go to conferences like B2B Online and share my experiences from the stage and I firmly believe in a rising tide floats all boats. I firmly believe that. And I think that the more that we can share like this and have these types of conversations and challenge the industry to do better and be better, I think the better off we'll all be, because it will increase the pie. Like, it's not a case of scarcity. There is enough opportunity for all of us to do very well if we focus on the buyers and their needs.
Absolutely, Jason.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.